Hey, everybody. Welcome to Terror Talk with Shannon and Kathy.
Hey.
Hello. Today on the show, we are going to talk horror podcasts and some of the ones that we listen to and we would recommend to you because we feel like, hey, we're part of this community and we want to turn you on, our listeners, onto other folks and see what you guys are listening to as well. So either on social media or comment on YouTube this episode and tell us like what you listen to, because we are fans just as much as we put out episodes every week. So we are always looking for new podcasts to listen to and inspiration for what we do. So that's what today is about. So if you're interested in hearing a little bit about our podcast, but also a little bit about a lot of other podcasts, today is the day. So I did want to start out, Kathy, with just kind of talking about, you know, we both had to do research for this, right? Because you got to listen to a bunch of podcasts to figure out sort of like, why do I like this? Which ones do I want to talk about first? And, you know, maybe in the future we do one of these ones where it's like true crime podcasts, because we obviously are in that genre as well. We kind of split our time. So we had to listen to a bunch of stuff. So I don't know what you found. You could please tell me, but I found that the horror genre of podcasts are split in a few different ways, right? So I think one of the most popular types of horror podcasts is the narrative podcast, where people are telling spooky stories.
Yep. And spooky stories is its own section.
Yep. And so we're talking like No Sleep podcast is obviously very famous. Scott Sigler, the writer, has had a podcast for years and years of his books, and he has this very complicated but very cool marketing structure. It's something really to be revered. He's really made a living creating this whole thing. And so his stories are on there. If you've ever read any of his books, a lot of them are pretty fun. Stuff like that. So there's the narrative ones, and there's a ton of them out there. Spooked, I just started listening to Spooked. That was a good.
I think I've listened to that one.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. So you just have to find the voices that you like and the stories that you like, and then go for it. And then there are horror podcasts that are interview based. Like that's basically all they do, is they interview people in the horror community. Actors, directors, writers, people involved with the movie industry, the TV industry, comedians, event performers, event putter-oners, you know, all of that. It's all interview based. Now we've done 3 or 4 interviews and that's been great. And we do intend to do more, but it's not really the basis of our show. However, absolutely open to more of them. In fact, we just got one of our interviews just got put on a DVD as a special feature. So
yeah, that's pretty cool.
Juliet Landau did a movie and we're a special feature on her DVD. It's amazing. A Place Among the Dead. If you want to check it out, we're a special feature on there. So that was cool. And so we would love to do more interviews, but we pick and choose. And then there's more like what we do, which is more discussion and review oriented. Are those kind of the 3 piles that you found in your?
I think so. Yeah, the storytelling, the interview, and then you said like the ones that we kind of do, which is I would say those are the most that I found that, you know, it's usually no more than 3 folks on, like as far as how many voices are on.
How many people are on there?
Yeah, it's 2 to 3. The largest I found was 3. Otherwise, it gets really distracting and you can't keep track of who's who.
Yeah, there's one really big one called Halloweenies, and I think there's 4 guys on that.
Yeah, I've listened to that.
But they switch off a lot, so sometimes it's not all 4, I think. But the industry word on the street, for those of you who don't know, for podcasts is like any more than 2 or 3. And the listeners kind of go, okay, there's too many voices. I don't know who's saying what. This gets more confusing. Unless you're on a panel and you have a host saying who's talking and asking questions, then you can have more. But otherwise, the listener just gets too freaking confused.
Well, and I also think, and this is, you know, while we're on this topic, what works for me and what keeps me there is chemistry. And I think just like in any conversation, it's much more intimate, like less is more. And it's already hard if you're just doing audio versus video. It's already hard enough really trying to convey that that rapport that you have, or that chemistry, and that takes a while. The more people you add, people kind of have to split loyalty into that chemistry. It's unconscious. I mean, it's just happening. It's not anything conscious, and it takes more work. Where I think when you have 2 to 3 people, it just kind of, the chemistry's there. It's easier to build. Sometimes it's not there even with 2 people, but you know what I mean.
Fair.
Yeah, and I found some of those.
Yeah, we're not going negative today. We're going to try to recommend some to you, but yes, of course, when you're listening to a lot of different stuff, you're going to find ones that you like and ones that you don't. And I think Kathy brings up a great point, as we're also going to, when we're talking about ones that we found that we like, we're obviously going to mention why.
Well, and here's one thing that I found because the ones that I ended up liking, and there'll be a couple that we're going to talk about a handful of them today, but the ones that I was like, I'm going to talk about these folks, you can tell, have either been friends for a while, or they have, at least the ones I'm talking about, they've either been friends for a while, or they have worked together. They've known each other, had some sort of relationship for a period of time that's already established, because otherwise you're spending the beginning of it trying to find the chemistry, and then you're doing that while trying to be creative. And I'm not saying it can't happen. It's just a longer road. You really have to know what you're getting into with the person you are. And it makes it a lot more fun when that chemistry is just organically there from the relationship being there.
It's certainly easier. I mean, we all know that people can get cast in a movie because they have chemistry, and not because they knew each other, but because they show up to the audition and they end up having chemistry. And that's why they get cast, because, Joe has chemistry with Jill because Jill's already got the contract. Jill's the movie star. And so Joe comes in and has chemistry with Jill, and that's why he gets cast. Podcasts like that are highly produced and produced by big companies can certainly have that, because those people get cast, and that's great. But we didn't get cast.
We did not.
We did it ourselves.
We did not.
So let's get to some of these. So the first one we want to talk about is one that I actually saw at last year's Midsummer Scream in Los Angeles, the convention. And if you don't know about it, it's a big horror convention, and they often have podcasts there doing either live recordings or just having a booth and handing out swag and this kind of thing. And I saw these 2 ladies there at a panel, or their own room, where they were doing like a live feed. And I told Kathy about them, and we're like, we have to talk about these ladies. And the name of the podcast is called Girl, That's Scary.
Oh, jeez. I love them so much.
They're amazing. So their website says they're the friendly neighborhood homegirls who discuss everything horror and sci-fi. And I just found, so I can only tell you that when I saw them in their room for this convention. So these rooms are funny because you're trying to record a podcast and talk to your audience, and there's like a bunch of hardcore folks that are actually also Los Angelians and are going to this convention. So it's not a ton of people, and they're all crowded up to the front, and they're just doing their thing, and people are going in and out in the back, and it's a whole vibe. But these ladies were just so funny, down to earth, going with it, like relating to the audience, just really natural. Their chemistry was clear. One was sort of more dry-witted than the other, and one was sort of hosting more than the other. And it was just, I just liked them immediately, and I had never heard of them. And so I wanted to definitely tell Kathy about it. And then here, of course, we wanted to get the word out.
Yeah. First of all, if you get a chance, go to their website, because I also think their website is really great. They're very inviting. They want you to know who they are. They want there's a part on their website where they list kind of like what Joe Bob does, but they list like the 5 items that I would want in a zombie apocalypse, right? Like you get to know them through like a horror lens. And not only are they funny, because they are hysterically funny, they use humor in such a smart way. The stuff that they're saying, they've watched the film. The way they talk about the film isn't just, it's easy to get on and just talk about the content of a movie. They use really smart humor to keep you engaged while really talking about the intricacies of the film. And I listened to the episode Yeehaw Horror, where they're talking about just the use of like country western, whatever, like, in horror, but specifically with the Black community. And she talks about like The Sims meets Meg Thee Stallion at the ranch, and they're like combining all these different, every time I listen to them, it makes my day. Yeah. And I even said to Shannon the other day, I was like, you got to listen to the newest episode. I think it was like the October 25th episode where they talk about,
at the time.
Yeah, they were talking about going to Comic-Con, and just their intro, they bring a lot of themselves, but not so much that they're talking about irrelevant things. Because I've listened to podcasts before where I'm like, I don't really care about this. The stuff that they bring is incredibly relevant. It's relevant to the horror scene, but also helps us get to know them as folks. And I just enjoy this podcast so much. I think they're incredibly knowledgeable.
I do too. I thought they were interesting, knowledgeable. They've watched a lot of films, because that's part of it, right? Is to be able to relate, oh, that's like this, and make jokes about, like, inside jokes about horror films. And so anybody who's a horror fan can listen and sort of get it, like, oh, she gets it, that type of thing.
Yep.
And you want to be relatable, and the chemistry is clear. They're very relatable. Mm-hmm. They say things that I don't think of. I would say, please go out, subscribe to them, check out their website, and enjoy them, because they are fantastic, and we are huge supporters and fans.
I'll just say this to leave you with this on them. Fun fact of each of them. This is on their website. So Jasmine, this is Jasmine's fun fact. Once I got my own Blockbuster card as a teenager, the first movie I rented with it was Salem's Lot, 1979. And then Kathleen, the other one, a.k.a. Cat, or Cat Daddy, she goes by. I wrote one of my college admissions essays on how the Rocky Horror Picture Show changed my life. I got in. I think that's so cool. So they're fun. I just think it really, we talk a lot about engaging our audience and getting them to get to know us, and us getting to know them. And I think that their website is just like really fun and inviting, and it's also horror, and it's awesome.
So another podcast that I listen to is Nightmare on Film Street, and I enjoy their chemistry, and here's what I like about it. Kathy mentioned this, and I like it when there's a little bit of shooting the shit at the beginning, a little bit of an intro. We kind of do that a little bit, and then you get to the topic. You have the energy in the beginning when you're all talking about something, and then you move into the topic of the day, and that same energy keeps going. It's like they don't change who they are when you're listening to them. You just kind of go forward. Have you ever heard them before?
I think I have come across them before. They're not on my list, but I know that I've heard of them before.
I was hoping we wouldn't have the same people on our list.
I don't think we do.
I don't think we do either. I can kind of guess the kind of shows that Kathy's going to pick, and she could probably guess the kind of ones
I think I did listen to this one for this episode, though.
Yeah, I listened to a lot of different ones, and here's my thing. Again, I'm not going to go negative, so I'm not going to name the podcast, but there were a lot of these kind of podcasts with mixed genders too, either couples or not couples, just friends, and not even just in the horror world, but other topics that I listen to. And sometimes it can go very awry, where they talk about their whatever that's not related to the topic.
Oh, God.
For sometimes upwards of like 30 minutes.
It's awful.
And I think that's why the episode is an hour and a half long, not because you're giving an hour and a half of content.
That's right.
But because you're spending 30 minutes of bullshit and not editing it.
And thinking that people care that much about a personal life that's unrelated to horror.
And you're not famous. You, person, me, right. You, these folks aren't famous. So it's like, if I'm listening to Smartless or Conan O'Brien or whatever, like I've been a fan of those guys for decades, and I definitely want to hear about their personal life.
Yeah.
Because I'm fans of their work.
Yes, you know them from something else.
They're movie stars or talk show hosts for the last 3 decades. Like, that's different than thinking you are a movie star and anybody cares about what you have for dinner. Now, keep in mind, if you've been listening to this for a while, or if you're going back to listening to episodes, we often have a little thing in the beginning where we talk about Kathy's vegan snack or the thing I did over the weekend or whatever. Now, that's not what we're talking about
30 plus minutes talking about a concert you went to.
I definitely want to get to know the host for 10 minutes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
I'm talking about when I'm like, okay, can we now get to the review of the thing?
Or if it's related, like I was saying with Girl That's Scary, they were talking about their trip to Comic-Con and some of the different things that happened while they were there. And it's funny
relevant,
and it pulls you into their work and their world. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, we try to do that. It's like a couple of weeks ago when we did the Unsolved Case Files, which we do pretty regularly. And it just so happened that Kathy's dog had gotten into the butter that day. And so we made it a little bit of a bit where we talked about the butter and the unsolved case of the butter murderer. Like shit like that.
Well, you bring up something important because I know that there are some of these podcasts are an hour and a half, 2 hours long.
Yeah.
And some of them are worth that amount of time.
Absolutely.
But there's a handful of them that like you and I could easily tag on another 40 minutes of shit
fuck yeah.
and talk about things that none of y'all out there really care about.
Right.
And it's
right.
that's not a good use of anybody's time.
Well, yeah, exactly. I agree. You guys might not agree. You might actually like all of that. Like that might keep you company on a commute. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't see the listener logs of all these podcasts. I don't know what their listenership is like or any of that. I just know about ours. And here's the thing. So that, Kathy, that actually brings up, which is relevant to Nightmare on Film Street, which I would recommend you go check out. If you like podcasts that do one movie and they talk about a movie for an hour. Mm-hmm. Now, this is like a subgenre of the podcasts that are review podcasts. There are horror review podcasts or movie review podcasts even, because I listen to regular movie review podcasts as well, there are ones that do a longer conversation, a deeper dive every time. They pick a movie and then the 2 or 3 people talk about it the whole time. And there's a few of them that I listen to like that. It's the podcast that you like come back to. Like you listen to a half an hour of it and then you go back to it and you listen to another half an hour. And they'll do one on like Halloween, right? And then they'll do that and they're pretty funny. What I would say is like Halloweenies is like that. Mm-hmm. There's 3 or 4 guys and they can literally talk about Freddy Krueger for 2.5 hours. But they're really interesting and insightful and funny, and I like it. And and it's fine. I can't listen to 2.5 hours in a sitting.
No. I've listened to them before,
but I'll go back to it.
Yeah.
The other one I found with that is, and I'll just mention them, but they're a bloody disgusting podcast, so they don't need our promotion. But it's called Forever Midnight.
Okay, I don't know if that one.
Now these 3 guys, they do a fair amount of shooting the shit, but they shoot the shit along the way,
intermittently.
Yeah, along the way.
That I like.
And they're very funny. There's a lot of F-bombs, which I enjoy. I mean, it's bloody disgusting, so they don't care. And it's on their network. And there's a lot of F-bombs. And, you get to, like, in the time that I listened to just one episode at one point, I learned about their relationship status. I learned one of the guys is vegan. I learned, I learned a bunch of stuff, but all the way through it was them making fun and talking about this movie.
They're dipping in and out of it.
Right.
They're holding our attention.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there are these review shows that just do the one movie. And then there are review shows that do a bunch of movie reviews, which we've done a lot of over the years. Or a theme. We do themes, right? Like all the Cabin movies or what our favorite, blah, blah, blah. I didn't find a ton of ones that are like ours where they talk about a bunch of movies.
Well,
did you?
I actually prefer the one and done for the reason that when I'm looking for a podcast I want to listen to, I might first get, let's be real, I might first get captivated by the artwork, the music, the title. I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. That looks cool. And then you go in. What keeps me there is chemistry, content, and organization. I really don't care about 5 horror reviews. I want to hear someone break down. And the 2 that I chose, they do it in very different, clever ways that I haven't seen other podcasts do, which is why I chose them. Because if you're doing one movie, then you have the opportunity to embed some of this funny personal stuff. If you're trying to do 4 films, it's hard. And you and I have done review shows before as a segment of our show, not as the whole show. Mm-hmm. But you're kind of trying to get through those versus like really taking that extra time to do a deep dive and then be able to have a more fun conversation in there. I prefer to listen to those.
Can you imagine you and I doing an hour-long conversation about whatever?
Yes.
Scream,
yes.
Halloween. Okay. Because we've never really, we do that on true crime documentaries, but when we've talked about movies, we usually tap out around 10 or 15 minutes.
Well, can I share with you one that I listened to and tell you what they did?
I would love it.
So the first one that I want to talk about is called Spooky Chicks and Horror Flicks. And I want to say, and I'm sorry, ladies, if I don't have this right, but based on your Instagram and your attendance at Midsummer Scream or Monsterpalooza, I can't remember which one it was. I think you're LA based. They do this, right? So like the one that I listened to was on the film Halloween, and their episodes are also like 45 minutes long. They're not 2 hours, which you have to consider. How long can you talk about one film?
Yeah. And are they putting out one episode a week, most of the ones you listen to?
Yeah. So let me share with y'all what they are. So this is how I describe them, and they're unapologetically like millennials with a very sophisticated horror, lexicon. They joke about they clink their wine glasses and they drink, they talk about how they're drinking through this conversation. It's really cute. They're super cute. They're really knowledgeable. They talk about old horror, which a lot of the younger generations either present it in a way like, oh, I don't understand this or I don't know it, which is fine, but I appreciate that they have this sophisticated knowledge. So welcome to Spooky Chicks and Horror Flicks, the podcast where two horror-loving ladies dissect, discuss, and devour everything related to the bone-chilling genre. From haunted houses to blood-soaked gore, we leave no creepy stone unturned, offering hilariously horrifying insights, opinions, and analysis of the scariest films ever made. Expect laughs, jumps, and screams as we share our favorite horror movie, moments, terrifying tales, and spine-tingling recommendations. Grab your popcorn, dim the lights, and prepare for a wickedly wild ride through horror cinema. Join us if you dare. Also a great website, really fun chemistry. They also start the episode with a little bit about their week, like you and I do sometimes. Mm-hmm. They definitely take their work seriously, but they don't take themselves seriously.
That's great.
They do have a producer that does the show. They also do trivia on the show. But what's clever about their trivia is that the producer actually finds all of the questions and they go into the episode not knowing the answers.
Yeah, I actually listened to a Disney podcast that does that.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. So they had a lot of fun. So I think they get the questions at the beginning like we do, except neither one of them know the answers.
Yeah, that's always fun.
So what they do, like the one that I listened to was Halloween. That was the one that I listened to all the way through. And I think why it works is they're not just talking about the film. They are embedding a couple different things in this conversation. So they do the trivia. While they're walking through the film, they're also sharing a lot of really cool facts about where it was filmed and a lot of the behind the scenes knowledge of John Carpenter. Then they make jokes about John Carpenter and how their dad probably knew him and was in a band. And then they go off on these funny stories about John Carpenter. There's this interwoven fun place that they take you that's new to the audience while then embedding the Halloween film and doing a commentary on it that isn't just most people have seen Halloween.
Oh yeah.
Right. So then they have something called I think it's like, I forgot I'm so sorry ladies if you listen to this because I did DM you and told you we'd be talking about you. They have a friend, it's like Zuri or Zel, and they call it the Zuri meter. I'm probably butchering her name. So she's someone who doesn't like certain types of horror movies. So they'll do a rating on the Zuri meter each week of whether Zuri would actually watch it. So it's or Zelly or something, but they are so much fun. And I feel like there's a momentum that you're not just getting lost. We all know Halloween. It's been done a million times on podcasts. So I think that's where I found them to be like, I want to continue to listen.
Oh, absolutely. And it sounds like they do a ton of organization and collaborating with each other around each episode, meaning you kind of have to know where the other person's going to go to be able to do that, right? Like some of it's organic, but you can, if you're a pretty good actor, you can like make it seem organic, but it sounds also like you take this chunk, you take that chunk, and you're in charge of facts for that. Like,
and their producer probably helps a little bit with that.
Oh, I would hope so.
But I think that when I listen to them, I go, I totally sit down and have a glass of wine with them and talk horror films because you just feel like you're in the room with them.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's awesome. The other podcast that I picked out for today is a podcast called Horror Queers, and it's two guys.
I listen to them.
Oh, good. Joe Lipset and Trace Thurman discuss horror films with LGBTQ plus themes and a high camp quotient, or both. What I like about them and what balances it out for me is, one, I like that theme or that culture or that subgenre of horror, but I also like the things that they'll pick. A lot of times they'll pick a movie that you wouldn't on the face of it think of it as a queer film, but then I get educated when I listen to them about, they're like, oh, and this and that and this, they give me all of these different facts about it. It's kind of like what you were talking about, Girl, That's Scary, where from their culture, you're getting that perspective of how they're viewing something from a different culture than yours.
Right.
They'll watch, Horror Queers will watch Totally Killer, which is something I've watched, and they'll pick things out, right? Or
they're Halloween. Fun. I listen to them too.
Or Halloween 2, or Chucky, or, the Halloween 1978. And they do like we do, where they put their Patreon clips on their channel, which I do, as you guys know, every Monday there's a Patreon clip that goes in there, and if you're interested in that, obviously you can join our Patreon and you got more stuff, but they do the same thing. And so they're very funny, and everybody likes humor in this genre. I find that all the podcasts I listen to, whether I found them funny or not, every single podcast I listen to incorporated a lively sense of humor. Mm-hmm. And that seems to be a clear through line for horror podcasts.
Of course.
Except for, of course, if it's narrative and it's trying to creep you out, those people aren't trying to be funny. Right. But the rest of them, all the like interviews and the review shows, they're all trying to incorporate a sense of levity and humor and joy for this genre, which we all feel. These guys are really funny. The other thing I noticed was that even if people were like more witty or sardonic or dry wit or whatever, they're lively. They have energy. They're bringing it, all the hosts I liked or I gravitated towards were lively and
100%
and paced.
No, they're super cute. I listened to them as well, and I listened to one or two of their episodes, and I also really liked that they pick out different things that other hosts may not pick out.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And I kind of like what I said about the other podcasts I've mentioned is that they'll say things that I didn't think about. And so we always hope that when you're listening to us, we come from a different vantage point and you're hearing us go and you go like, oh, I didn't think of that or whatever. Or even when you and I are talking, I'll go like, oh, Kathy, I didn't think about it that way. That's right. Cool. Like we do that with each other. And that's the beauty of talking about movies, right? So I really enjoy their personalities. And then I also learn something. So that would be one of my bottom lines is like, I want to enjoy the personality. I want to enjoy the listen.
Yeah.
I want to follow. Like, I don't want you to be
that
like
organization
ADD.
Is so key.
I don't want someone to be all over the place because then I can't follow. So it's got to be somewhat produced and somewhat organized. And then I just like the liveliness. There needs to be an energy in the room. And honestly, Kathy and I both know that if we come to this tired, sometimes it's hard to get the energy, but you just got to do it, man.
Yeah, no, it's true. No, I liked them. They were, I had to choose, but they were on that list.
Yeah, I had to choose too. But okay.
The last one I'll talk about is a podcast called Ruined. And this one's a little bit larger than like some of the more independent ones. So, and I'll give you the reason why. It's not nearly as big as something like Serial or whatever, but it's not low, budget.
Like, I know.
Like us.
So
Ruined is a weekly movie podcast in which horror aficionado Haley Kiefer unpacks a different spooky film for her squeamish friend and co-host Allison Leby, who can't stomach watching horror herself, but is dying to know the twists. Every week, the hosts ruin a horror movie, from slashers to home invasions, creature features to the supernatural. They cover it all. Horror fans, scaredy cats, and film buffs are all welcome. So a little bit about Allison Leby is she's a New York comic. I didn't know this till after. I wasn't looking up anybody. I was just looking up podcasts. But then I was like, God, she is funny. So she's a comedian and writer whose critically acclaimed solo show, Oh God, an Hour About Abortion, drew packed houses to the Cherry Lane Theater, was selected as one of the New York Jewish Week's 36 to watch, formerly 36 under 36. The distinction honor leaders, entrepreneurs, and change makers who are making a difference in New York's Jewish community. Their chemistry is fantastic. They make fun of everyone, including themselves. It's really great. They are these folks that you want to sit down and watch a horror movie with. The 2 episodes that I listened to were The Dentist and Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. What they do is they do a little bit of shooting the shit at the beginning about themselves and things that they hate. I can't remember if it was Haley or Allison at the beginning of one. They were talking about, I was at this bar this week, and she's like, there's one thing I hate. And I don't even, she's like, the next time I go to the bar, I probably won't even hate it. I'll probably be like, oh, that's actually kind of cute or whatever. She goes, I hate when I go to bars that are not meant to play board games and someone takes up half the bar by sitting down and having to open up a board game. And she goes into this whole, like, she hates it so much. And she's like, but it's really funny is the next time I go to this bar and I see it, I'm probably gonna be like, oh, that's kind of cute. So she's like, I don't even really know. So every time they make fun of someone, they throw it back on themselves. It's very balanced that way. Haley is the horror lover. So she picks the film, I believe, watches it, and then asks Allison, what do you think the twist is? Right?
It's a great, I just want to comment. I just want to comment. I listen to this one too sometimes.
Yeah.
And the gimmick is so solid. Like,
it's so solid.
This is a pitch that you would, a producer would make. Like, hey, this is the premise of the whole thing. And then you got to do the same thing every week, and you got to do the same thing forever. But that's how, like, a solid gimmick works, right?
It's so good.
And it's so good.
And so The Dentist, they have like a good 30-minute discussion on like the just the atrocity of going to the dentist. And so there's like, they build up this fear. But then Haley's commentary on this, literally the beat by beat of this dentist who's like, she's like, what dentist? And why is he concentrated on the wife's blah, blah, blah? Like, they go off on these tangents.
That's what all these guys do.
And it is so funny. So I won't ruin Ruined. I highly say it's something very different. And the way that they walk us through the film, once Allison guesses the twist and Hallie's either like, yes or no. Mm-hmm. And then she goes into it. And then Allison has all of her reactions to Haley's. It's fucking funny.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love that gimmick and I love that premise. And I think that's so fun. And I can see why they would be like a more famous podcast because, one, she's a performer, and two, that's just such a solid premise. Like, if you buy into that premise and you think that's fun, that's a way to do one movie a shot and have a 45-minute conversation, because there's a lot there. If you're going to go beat by beat with a movie and make fun of everything and talk about everything, it's easy to get to an hour.
Oh yeah. There's one other I'm not going to talk about in detail that does something similar, and it's called I Hope You Suffer.
Yeah.
And they watch the movies we don't want to watch, like Killer Condom and Chompy the something. And that one's kind of funny too, because they'll be like, we're going to save you. We watched this one this week, and they find the most beat up B horror films, and it's pretty funny.
Yeah, there's another one, and I'm so sorry I'm not going to remember the name of it. Damn it. It's a husband and a wife, and I don't think it's horror. That's why it's not. I didn't include it. I think it's just regular movies. Maybe. Not sure. Can't remember now. Damn it. The husband will show the wife horror movies. He's making her watch horror movies, basically, and that's kind of the gimmick. And then it's like his love and his excitement, and then her reactions and her like total nopeness to most of it is just the funniest thing. Awesome. And I can't remember the name of it right now. Hopefully I can find it and put it in the notes. But
that's fun.
That gimmick is cool. Like the one person liking, and then one, that dichotomy of personality is also really successful. So I think we've talked about several that are like people who really connect on horror movies and talking about that, and people that really don't connect on that. And that's the joke. And that's the things. I just hope that you guys have gotten some inspiration and that you go out and support these folks, whether whether they're big or small or medium in their famousness or their podcastness on here. We just wanted to spread some love in the community because we've been doing this for, this is our 6th season now, and we just love doing this, and we love supporting others. And we hope that you have enjoyed this podcast. This has been an episode of Terror Talk. My name is Shannon.
And I'm Kathy. Sleep safe, everyone.